Hey everybody, I'm going to go ahead and add this particular video real quick to my Qabalah videos. And it's kind of an extension off of what I was showing you on this recent news where they said the bright flash of light marks an incredible moment where life begins. So I was showing you a couple of places in different texts how that was portrayed. One in the stanzas from Blavatsky's Secret Doctrine, which a lot of that stuff there is taken from the old ancient Hindu and understanding. If you listen to what she has to say, she knows all there is to know about Sanskrit, ancient Hindu religion. She knows all about that kind of stuff. And when we take a look at that ancient religion, we also see that these guys, including, if you want to look at the Gospel of Judas, if you want to take a look at the Nag Hammadi Library, these types of things, you'll see that this whole story about the first light and then this basically being everything being created through it. Well, I wanted to show you something else that also ties to this same thing, okay? So a lot of people, when they think of Christ, the first thing that pops into their head is Jesus, okay? But Jesus is the historical figure who became the Christ. And this is also, and when I say he became the Christ, he merged with it. His consciousness level reached a height where he merged with the Christ. But the Christ is a title. It was not his last name. There is a priest who talks about the cosmic Christ, who I can't think of off the top of my head, but I've got it in my video list. And the Christ is the first light. Now let's look at what the Colossians has to say here. Colossians 1:15. The Son, capital S, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. So if you think of this cosmically, it's speaking of that first point. And since we're thinking also fractally, it would be the first point or first light of any system coming into being. Now, right down here on the next one, if we look at this next translation, New Living Translation, we can see that the Son has been replaced with Christ. Christ is the visible image, something you can see, versus the invisible God, which is, if we take a look at the ancient Hindu texts, it says that mind began thinking on the various elements and became a spark of itself, a nebula in the vacuity of the yet unborn universe, I believe is how the phrase goes. And that is in the Yoga Vasistha that you will find. So mind, which is invisible, becomes a spark of itself, which is something visible. And this is the reason I believe that there is significance when we take a look into the nebula, because the nebula is that first light, or it is the first projection of light that comes out of what we're calling this center vortex area that seems to be, according to recent news that we've seen from Hawking and other scientists, this phenomenon, what do we want to call it, a plasmoid or a black hole or a portal or a wormhole, whatever we want to call it. This vortex is what is being pointed to in these ancient texts, and it is the eye, or the very center of the nebula, the very first point in a chain of creation, whether it is the center of a galaxy or whether it is the center of a nebula that creates stars. It is that first point of the whole system. And so it says Christ is the visible image of the invisible God. He existed before anything was created and is supreme over all creation. So if we think of this fractally, it could be the whole universe. And there's probably a similarity between the whole universe coming into an existence and a nebula coming into an existence. There are probably the same process if we look at analogy. This is the way we kind of have to look at Hermetic philosophy. So this is what the Bible says right here. So it's that first light. Now, and then right after that it says, for in him all things were created, things in heaven and on the earth, visible and invisible. So through him, God created everything. Okay? So we see this is the point where everything was created from. That's what it's saying. Now this is very Kabbalistic, these two verses. And I want to show you a similarity between this and what we see in the Gospel of the Egyptians from the Nag Hammadi Library. Okay, so then we have the same thing. Then there came forth from that place the cloud of the great light, the living power, the mother of the holy incorruptible ones, And some of the Gnosis stuff in here, it gets really into detail, naming all the various gods, which are really just extensions or fingers on the hand of one god, right? It's all, they are just dividing up with inside themselves. But it says, for this one, Adamas is a light which radiated from the light. He is the eye of the light. For this is the first man. He through whom and to whom everything came into being. For this is the first man, he through whom and to whom everything came into being. For in him all things were created. Through him God created everything in the heavenly realms. For by him all things were created in heaven and earth. For this is the first man, he through whom and to whom everything came into being. This is the same thing that we see in the Bible. And this is very Kabbalistic. And this is why. If we take a look at Qabalah, number 1 is Kether. 0 is the invisible God. So it has not come into existence yet. It comes into existence through Kether. And Kether is the first point in a system. And Kabbalistically, we can see that Asiya, world of expression, prima mobile, nebula. The treetop at last. Now, let's take a look at what Manly Hall has to say about Kether and how he identifies it in The Secret Teaching of All Ages. This is from the Tree of the Sephiroth, okay? And so let's listen to what he has to say about this. Kether, the crown prima mobile, the fiery heavens. This is the area of the nebula. This is the first point in a system. And if we take a look right here in the Tree of the Sephiroth, it's also Kabbalistic. Listen, remember what we just said? We just said this right here. For this is the first man, he through whom and to whom everything came into being, his name being Adamas, okay? Which is the same as Adam, basically. So if we take a look at Genesis or if we take a look at John, we're looking at the same story with different understandings. And in the Old Testament, Adam would be kind of like the Christ. In the New Testament, it calls it the Christ. Okay? So here in Colossians, we see the same thing. Through him everything was created. Now, in the Secret Teaching of All Ages, it says the 4 Kabbalistic trees described in the preceding chapter were combined by later Jewish scholars into one all-inclusive diagram and termed by them not only the Sephirothic but also archetypal or heavenly man. According to some authorities, it is the heavenly Adam, not a terrestrial man, heavenly Adam, whose creation is described in the opening chapters of Genesis. Let there be light, the great cloud of the great light. Out of the substances of this divine man, the universe was formed. Okay, so this is Kether, the crown, the fiery heavens. Out of him, the eye of the light, which is described inside of the Gospel of the Egyptians in Colossians 1:15 and 1:16. This is the cosmic Christ coming into existence. Okay, so now we move down, and Kether, remember, is tied to the pineal gland. So we have the Sephirothic tree is sometimes depicted as a human body, thus more definitely established in the true identity of the first, or heavenly man, Adam Kadmon, the idea of the universe. So Adam Kadmon, right? So when we think of Adam Kadmon, we're thinking of a universal system. Where, like, for example, your body, you are an image of the Adam Kadmon, your brain being something similar to the cosmic version, which would be the nebula, and then, of course, branching down the nervous system through all zigzagging down the tree of life, you have the rest of your organs and stuff like that, which are associated Kabbalistically to the tree of life. Okay? So, in fact, Kabbalistically, the sun of our solar system that we are familiar with, that is really close to us, the one that's 93 million miles away, that sun is the heart of the system. The brain of the system is where everything began. And if we take the human body and we put it on top of the tree of life, like I show you right here, this is the sun, and this is the brain. And esoterically, the brain is behind the sun. So if we're down on Earth here, at the very bottom, the brain is behind the sun. We're Earth, the sun, the brain. And this is what, we have 2 suns, or I believe 3, even esoterically, if we take a look at it. But Kabbalistically, we have at least 2 suns here. We have the sun, which is the heart of the solar system, But this was only meant to be, to the ancients, an image of this sun here, which is an image of the invisible. Okay? All right, so back to this. If we take a look at this, the pineal gland. Kether is the crown of the prototypic head and perhaps refers to the pineal gland. Chokmah and Binah, which is right here, are the right and left hemispheres, respectively, of the great brain. Okay, so this is the pineal gland. Chokmah and Binah are the right and left hemispheres of the great brain, and this is how you place the human body on the tree of life. This is the nebula, the very center of Kether, and the way we typically will see the tree of life drawn is when we see it drawn Kabbalistically. We see almost like a pouring in of light into Kether. But this area up here, being Ein Sof, Or, and Ein, these are the invisible portions. These are the negative realms. And then, of course, we comes into existence and then creates the universe into the world of Asiya, which is what we see right here. So it says here that Kether is the crown of the prototypic head and perhaps refers to the pineal gland. Okay? And in the Gospel of the Egyptians, the first thing that came into being was, he is the eye of the light, for this is the first man. It's the pineal gland. It is the eye. And it is the center vortex within inside the center of a nebula or a galaxy or whatever fractal system we're talking about. In our particular case, which we see over and over in all of these cathedrals and everything all the way back to Atlantis, we see a specific importance tied to the Orion Nebula, because this is what they are painting in these cathedrals. The Orion Nebula was what was referred to by the Mayans as the seat of creation. We see in the ancient Hindu text, we see a reference to this as well. And of course, the ancient Egyptians believed that, and of course, this was the place as well. So we have this all over the world, okay? And then we also have it in the Bible. But the reason why they're painting this particular area is the mystery. Because even though we're all human, we all have different fingerprints. And the fingerprint or signature of this particular location is what the ancients were interested in, and what we see these Gnostics or people who put these cathedrals together, what they were doing inside the church or inside these cathedrals. Very interesting. And these are probably going to be some topics I talk about with Timothy Hogan if I can get him on pretty soon. So anyways, I thought you guys would be interested in seeing that comparison between the Bible, the Gospel of the Egyptians, Nagam, and this is just one other place. I mean, there's many other places I can go and show this to you. And as time goes on, I may represent some of those things to you, trying to get it fresh in your head so you can see that what we're looking at are just the same story from different texts, whether it be the Nag Hammadi Library, whether it be the Bible, whether it be the Emerald Tablet, whether it be all these different things are all telling the same story. And one of the reasons why I like Bible Hub here is because I can go down and I can look at that particular verse, Son, Christ, and I can see all these different people have interpreted it differently. But I can get a good idea about what they are referring to, because if I only look at one of these, it doesn't give you, this does not give me anything. Who is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over every creature? Now, creature does give you something, because that's almost hermetic, and it shows that that of every creature, including yourself, right, that the Christ is the first visible point. So this is Hermetic philosophy. This is something going into something a little bit deeper, which I won't go into this video. Anyways, thought you guys would be interested in hearing that. I will talk to you soon.